7 years ago, the woman I was about to marry left me for my rich brother. Today, at our father's funeral, my brother strutted in with her, all shine and smug. She leaned in close enough that I could smell her expensive perfume and whispered, "So, I guess I won, right? You're still poor." I looked her dead in the eye and said calmly, "Yeah? Well, meet my wife." She froze, because standing next to me was someone she never expected to see. Someone who would shatter everything she thought she knew about winning and losing. My name is David Thornton. I'm 35 years old, and for the past 7 years, I've been rebuilding a life that was torn apart by the two people I trusted most. What I'm about to tell you isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about discovering that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the best thing that ever could have happened. But before we get into how everything unfolded at that funeral, before I tell you about the woman standing beside me who made my ex-fiance's face drain of all color, I need to take you back. Back to when I was 28 years old, working as a high school history teacher in Portland, Oregon, making $42,000 a year, and thinking I had my whole life figured out. If you're enjoying this story so far, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment below about a time when karma caught up with someone who wronged you. And smash that like button because this story is about to get intense. Her name was Jessica Hartley. She was 26 when we met, working as a dental hygienist at the practice where I went for my annual cleaning. She had auburn hair that caught the light just right, green eyes that seemed to see right through you, and a smile that could make you forget whatever you were worried about. We started dating after I worked up the courage to ask her out following my third appointment that year. I'd never needed that much dental work before, but I kept finding reasons to go back. Our relationship was comfortable. That's the word I'd use. Comfortable. We'd grab dinner at chain restaurants, watch Netflix on Friday nights, and talk about buying a house someday when we'd saved enough for a down payment. Jessica liked the idea of stability. She'd grown up in a family that struggled financially, her father bouncing between jobs, and she'd told me on our fourth date that she never wanted to live like that again. I proposed after 2 years, on a camping trip to Crater Lake. Nothing fancy, just the two of us, a campfire, and a ring I'd saved up 6 months to buy. It cost me $20,800, which was a fortune on a teacher's salary. She cried when she said yes, and I remember thinking that I was the luckiest man alive. My brother Cameron was 32 at the time, 4 years older than me, and about as different from me as you could get. Where I'd chosen education and purpose over profit, Cameron had chosen money over everything else. He'd started a tech consulting firm right out of college, rode the wave of companies desperate to modernize their systems, and by the time he was 30, he was pulling in 7 figures annually. Cameron lived in a penthouse apartment in downtown Portland with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. He drove a black Mercedes S-Class and wore suits that cost more than my monthly rent. But here's the thing about my brother, he was never satisfied. Every achievement was just a stepping stone to the next one. Every success measured only by how much bigger the next one could be. We'd grown up in the same house, shared the same parents, but somewhere along the way, Cameron had decided that winning was the only thing that mattered. And winning, for Cameron, meant having more than everyone else, especially more than me. Our father, Richard Thornton, had always been harder on me than on Cameron. Dad was a self-made businessman who'd built a chain of hardware stores from nothing, and he never understood why I'd chosen teaching over business. "You're wasting your potential," he'd tell me over holiday dinners. Cameron gets it. He understands that money is how you keep score in life. Cameron would sit there smirking, soaking up Dad's approval like a plant in sunlight. And I'd sit there, drinking my beer, reminding myself that I'd chosen a life of purpose over profit, that I was making a difference in kids' lives, that money wasn't everything. But sometimes, late at night, I'd wonder if Dad was right, if I'd made the wrong choice. The engagement dinner was where everything started falling apart, though I didn't see it at the time. Jessica and I had been engaged for 3 months, and we'd planned a small family dinner to celebrate with both our families. Just parents, siblings, nothing fancy. We chose an Italian restaurant in the Pearl District, the kind of place with red checkered tablecloths and candles in wine bottles. Cameron showed up 20 minutes late, made an entrance like he was walking onto a stage, and immediately took over the conversation. He talked about his latest business deal, some merger that was going to net him a substantial payday. He ordered the most expensive wine on the menu without asking anyone else what they wanted. and he kept directing his attention toward Jessica, asking her questions about her work, her family, her dreams for the future. At the time, I thought he was just being friendly, making an effort with his future sister-in-law. Jessica seemed charmed by the attention, laughing at his jokes, asking him questions about his business. I remember feeling proud that my brother and my fiancé were getting along so well. My mother, Patricia, pulled me aside when I went to the bathroom. "David, honey," she said, her voice careful. "Maybe keep an eye on how much Cameron's talking to Jessica. You know how your brother is." I'd laughed it off. "Mom, he's just being nice. It's fine." But mothers know things. They see patterns we're too close to notice. Over the next few months, I started noticing small things. Jessica mentioning Cameron in conversation more often than seemed necessary. Cameron was telling me about this restaurant we should try. Cameron said the housing market's going to crash soon. Maybe we should wait to buy. Cameron thinks I should look into dental practice management. Says I'm too smart to be cleaning teeth forever. I told myself it was innocent. Cameron was successful, worldly, someone whose opinion carried weight. Of course, Jessica would value his advice. But then came the text messages. I wasn't the type to check Jessica's phone. Never had been. Never thought I'd need to be. But one night she left it on my coffee table while she went to take a shower, and a notification popped up. A message from Cameron. "Can't wait to see you again. Last night was incredible." My stomach dropped to my feet. I told myself it couldn't mean what it sounded like. There had to be an explanation. Maybe they'd run into each other somewhere. Maybe it was about a surprise they were planning for me. I opened the message thread and my world ended. Months of messages. Flirting, planning secret meetings, explicit content I won't repeat here. They'd been sleeping together for at least 4 months. Meeting at his penthouse while I was at work, grading papers and planning lessons. Completely oblivious that my fiancé was betraying me with my own brother. The messages weren't just about sex. They were talking about a future together. Cameron telling Jessica she deserved better than a broke teacher who'd never amount to anything. Jessica telling Cameron she'd made a mistake saying yes to me, that she'd been settling for security instead of reaching for success. One message from Cameron stuck with me. "David's always been the family disappointment. Dad knows it, I know it, and deep down, you know it too. You deserve someone who can give you the life you want, not someone who will keep you trapped in mediocrity forever." When Jessica came out of the shower, wrapped in my towel, smiling like nothing was wrong, I was sitting on the couch with her phone in my hand. "David, what are you—" she started. "How long?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. "I don't know what." "Don't lie to me. Not now. How long have you been sleeping with my brother?" She stood there for a long moment, water dripping from her hair onto my carpet. Then something in her face changed. The guilt disappeared, replaced by something harder. Defiance, maybe, or relief that the secret was finally out. 5 months, she said. Since your father's birthday party. That was when I'd been designated driver, taking care of Dad who'd had too much to drink, making sure everyone got home safely. While I was being the responsible son, Cameron had made his move. "Why?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Jessica sat down across from me, not bothering to hide anymore. "Because Cameron can give me the life I want, David. I'm tired of budgeting for everything. Tired of choosing between buying new clothes and saving for a house. Tired of planning a wedding I can't afford. Cameron takes me to restaurants where the bill is more than your weekly paycheck. He bought me a bracelet last month that cost more than your car. I thought you loved me." "I did," she said, and for a moment I saw something like sadness in her eyes. "I do, in a way. You're kind, you're stable, you're safe. But safe isn't enough anymore, David. I want more. And Cameron can give me more. He's my brother. And he's a better man than you'll ever be." The words came out cold, matter of fact. "I'm sorry if that hurts, but it's the truth. You chose to be a teacher making nothing while Cameron built an empire. You chose mediocrity while he chose success. And I'm choosing him." She went into my bedroom, got dressed, and packed the few things she kept at my apartment. The engagement ring I'd saved 6 months to buy sat on my coffee table where she'd placed it. She didn't even look back when she walked out the door. I sat there in my apartment, staring at that ring, and realized I'd lost everything. My fiancé, my brother, my faith in family, all in the span of 20 minutes. The next day, I called Cameron. He answered on the third ring, his voice carrying that smug satisfaction that would haunt me for years. "I figured you'd call," he said. "How could you do this?" "How could I not?" Cameron replied. "Jessica's an amazing woman, David. Smart, beautiful, ambitious. She deserves someone who can match her ambition. Someone who's not content being a glorified babysitter making poverty wages. She was engaged to me, and now she's with me. That's how the world works, little brother. The strong take what they want. The weak complain about fairness. We're family, Cameron." He laughed. Actually laughed. "Family is just an accident of birth, David. It doesn't mean anything. Jessica chose me because I'm the better option. Maybe this will teach you that your choices have consequences." I wanted to drive to his penthouse and put my fist through his face, but I didn't. I just hung up and sat there, feeling like someone had hollowed me out with a spoon. The worst part came 2 weeks later when Cameron and Jessica made it official on social media. Photos of them at expensive restaurants, at charity galas, on a trip to Napa Valley. Jessica wearing designer clothes and jewelry I could never have afforded. Every post felt like a knife in my chest. My mother called, crying. "David, I'm so sorry. I should have said something sooner. I saw the way Cameron looked at her, but I hoped he wouldn't actually..." My father called too, but his message was different. "You need to move on, son. Jessica made her choice. Cameron made his. Fighting about it won't change anything. Just accept it and focus on your own life. No apology. No acknowledgement that what Cameron did was wrong. Just disappointment that I couldn't handle it better." That's when I realized I was truly alone. The next 6 months were the darkest of my life. I lost 15 pounds because I couldn't eat. Couldn't sleep more than a few hours at a stretch. Showed up to work looking like death, going through the motions of teaching while feeling dead inside. My students noticed. One of them, a kid named Tyler, who always sat in the back, stayed after class one day. "Mr. Thornton, are you okay? You seem really sad." I tried to brush it off, but Tyler didn't let it go. "My mom says when you're going through something hard, you gotta keep going anyway, even when you don't want to. She says that's what brave looks like." Tyler's mother was a single parent working 2 jobs. I'd met her at parent-teacher conferences, seen the exhaustion in her eyes, the determination, and here was her kid, trying to encourage his teacher who was falling apart. That conversation stuck with me. Tyler's mom didn't have the luxury of falling apart. She just kept going. Maybe I needed to do the same. I started seeing a therapist named Dr. Helen Morrison. She was expensive, ate into my already tight budget, but she was worth every penny. Dr. Morrison helped me understand that what Cameron and Jessica did said nothing about my worth as a person and everything about their character. "You chose a career based on values," she told me during one session. "They chose each other based on greed and status. Who do you think is going to be happier in the long run?" "They seem pretty happy in all their photos," I said bitterly. "Social media is a highlight reel, David. Nobody posts the fights, the doubts, the moments when they realize they've built a relationship on a foundation of betrayal. Give it time." I started running. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed to do something with the anger burning inside me. 5 miles a day, then 7, then 10. The physical pain was easier to deal with than the emotional pain. And slowly, very slowly, I started feeling like myself again. But I also made a decision. I was done being the family disappointment. Done being the guy everyone underestimated. I was going to build something. Prove that my father and Cameron were wrong about me. I just didn't know what yet. The answer came from an unexpected place. One of my colleagues, a computer science teacher named Greg Patterson, mentioned he was developing an educational app on the side. Something to help students learn history through interactive timelines and gamification. "Problem is," Greg said over lunch, "I can build the software, but I don't know enough about history curriculum to make it actually useful. Every time I try to write content, it sounds like a Wikipedia article." "Want some help?" I offered. That casual conversation became a partnership. Greg and I spent our evenings and weekends building History Quest, an app that made learning history engaging for students who'd grown up with smartphones and short attention spans. We poured everything we had into it. Money, time, expertise. 6 months after we launched, we had 10,000 downloads. A year later, 100,000. School districts started reaching out, wanting to license it for their entire systems. Educational publishers wanted to acquire it. 2 years after that lunch conversation, Greg and I sold History Quest to one of the largest educational publishers in the country for $8 million. After taxes, legal fees, and splitting it with Greg, I walked away with $3.2 million. I was 31 years old, and suddenly wealthy beyond anything I'd imagined. But here's what Cameron and Jessica never understood. The money didn't change who I was. I kept teaching for another year because I loved it. I bought a modest house, not a penthouse. I drove a reliable car, not a status symbol. And I used a significant portion of that money to establish a scholarship fund for students from low-income families who wanted to become teachers. I didn't advertise my wealth, didn't post about it on social media, didn't send Cameron a gloating message. I just lived my life, quietly, purposefully, and tried to move on from the betrayal that had nearly destroyed me. Moving on included dating again, though I was cautious to the point of paranoia. Every woman I met, I found myself wondering if she was interested in me or what I could provide. It made relationships difficult, always looking for ulterior motives, always waiting for betrayal. Then I met Sarah Chen at a teachers' conference in Seattle. She was a special education teacher from Sacramento, passionate about inclusive education, funny in a dry way that took me by surprise. We talked for 3 hours over conference center coffee, and I didn't mention my financial situation once. Sarah was different from Jessica in every way that mattered. Where Jessica had been focused on appearance and status, Sarah cared about substance and impact. She drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic and didn't apologize for it. She wore jeans and comfortable shoes instead of designer labels. And when she talked about her students, her face lit up with genuine love. We dated long distance for 8 months before I asked her to move to Portland. Before I did, I told her everything about my past, about Jessica and Cameron, about the money from selling History Quest. I needed to know if the money would change things. Sarah listened to everything, then looked at me and said, "David, I don't care about your money. I care that you used it to help students become teachers. That tells me who you are. The rest is just numbers in a bank account." We got married a year later. Small ceremony, just close friends and my mother. I didn't invite my father or Cameron. They weren't part of my life anymore, and I was okay with that. For the next 3 years, Sarah and I built a life together. We traveled during summer breaks, hosted game nights with other teachers, talked about maybe starting a family someday. I was happy, genuinely happy, in a way I'd never been with Jessica. Then my father died. The call came from my mother on a Tuesday morning. "David, it's your father. He had a massive heart attack. He's gone." I felt something, but it wasn't grief. It was more like closing a book you never really enjoyed reading. My father and I hadn't spoken in 6 years, not since I told him I wouldn't be attending Cameron's wedding to Jessica. He'd called me ungrateful, said I was holding a grudge over something that worked out for the best. "There's going to be a funeral," Mom said. "I know things have been difficult, but I need you there. Please, David, for me." I looked at Sarah, who was watching me with concerned eyes. "We'll be there," I told Mom. The funeral was at St. Michael's Catholic Church, the same church where my father had attended Mass every Sunday for 40 years. I wore a dark suit and stood in the back with Sarah watching people file in. Business associates, employees from his hardware stores, neighbors, family friends. Then Cameron and Jessica walked in. 7 years had passed since I'd seen them in person. Cameron looked older, some gray in his hair, lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. He was wearing a suit that probably cost $5,000, but something about him seemed diminished, like he was working too hard to appear successful. Jessica was on his arm, wearing a black dress that screamed expensive. She'd aged well, still beautiful, but there was something hard in her face now, something that hadn't been there when she was 26. They saw me standing there with Sarah. Cameron's face went carefully neutral. Jessica's eyes widened slightly, then narrowed as she took in Sarah, processed what her presence meant. After the service, people gathered in the church hall for coffee and reminiscing. I was standing with Sarah, listening to one of my father's old business partners tell stories, when Cameron approached. "David," he said, extending his hand like we were business acquaintances. "Thanks for coming." I looked at his hand for a long moment before shaking it briefly. "Mom asked me to be here." "Right." Cameron's smile was forced. "This is awkward." Is it? I asked. I hadn't noticed. Jessica appeared at Cameron's side, and I saw her eyes assessing Sarah with the calculation of a jeweler examining a competitor's work. David, Jessica said, her voice saccharine, it's been so long. Not long enough, I replied evenly. She laughed like I'd made a joke. Still bitter, I see, after all these years. Sarah's hand found mine, squeezed gently. A reminder to stay calm, to not engage. I'm not bitter, I said. I'm grateful. You did me a favor. Jessica's smile faltered. A favor? You showed me who you really were before I made the mistake of marrying you. That's worth more than any ring. Cameron stepped forward slightly, protective mode engaging. Come on, David. We're at our father's funeral. Can't we be civil? I am being civil, I said. Civil would be ignoring you completely. What you did to me wasn't civil, Cameron. It was calculated cruelty. But I've moved on. Clearly, Jessica said, her voice dripping with sarcasm as she looked at Sarah. Though I have to say, I expected you to end up with someone a bit more impressive. That's when Sarah spoke up, her voice calm but firm. Impressive how? Morally? Professionally? Because I'm fairly certain I've got you beat on both counts. Jessica's face flushed red. Excuse me? You heard me, Sarah continued. I don't know you, and honestly, I don't want to, but I know what you did to my husband 7 years ago, and I know that people who build their relationships on betrayal rarely end up happy. Oh, we're very happy, Jessica said quickly. Too quickly. Cameron's business is doing amazing. We have everything we could want. Except integrity, Sarah said simply. Cameron's jaw tightened. You don't know anything about us. I know enough, Sarah replied. I know you're the kind of man who steals from his own brother. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. That's when Jessica leaned in, close enough that I could smell her expensive perfume, and whispered, So, I guess I won, right? You're still just a teacher, and we're living the life you could never provide. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something I'd missed 7 years ago. Desperation. She needed me to believe she'd won because deep down, she wasn't sure she had. Yeah? I said calmly. Well, meet my wife. Jessica froze, her eyes darting between Sarah and me, confusion replacing her smugness. My wife Sarah, I continued, who loves me for who I am, not what I can buy her. My wife who chose me when she thought I was just a teacher making a teacher's salary. My wife who didn't care when I told her about the money because money was never what mattered to her. Cameron's face had gone carefully blank. What money? The money from selling my educational software company 3 years ago, I said. You know, the one I built from nothing while you were busy stealing my fiancé. The one that sold for $8 million. The color drained from Jessica's face. You're lying. Am I? Ask Greg Patterson, or check the business news from 3 years ago. History Quest, sold to Pearson Education. It made headlines in the education sector. Cameron was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. You sold a company for $8 million and didn't tell anyone? I told the people who mattered, I said, squeezing Sarah's hand. The people in my actual life. You stopped being part of my life the day you betrayed me. Jessica looked like she'd been slapped. But you're still teaching. You drive a Honda. Because those are my choices, I said. I teach because I love it. I drive a reliable car because I don't need to prove anything to anyone. And I'm happier than I've ever been. You're lying, Jessica repeated, but her voice was shaking now. This is just some pathetic attempt to make yourself feel better. Sarah pulled out her phone, did a quick search, and showed Jessica the article. David Thornton and Greg Patterson, Portland teachers who built History Quest, sell to Pearson for undisclosed sum. The article estimated the sale price at $8 to $10 million. Jessica's hand was trembling as she handed the phone back. She looked at Cameron, and I saw years of doubt suddenly crystallize into terrible certainty. How much do you make now? I asked Cameron conversationally. Still pulling in 7 figures, or has the market gotten harder? Cameron's silence was answer enough. That's what I thought, I said. See, the thing about building a business on consulting is that you're only as valuable as your last contract. The tech sector's been brutal the past few years, hasn't it? We're doing fine, Cameron said, but his voice lacked conviction. Are you, though? I asked. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been working a lot harder for a lot less. Funny how that works. Jessica was looking at Cameron now with an expression I remembered well. The calculation, the reassessment, the wondering if she'd made the right choice. The difference between you and me, Cameron, I continued, is that I built something that mattered. Something that helps kids learn. Something that will outlast both of us. What have you built besides a reputation for betraying family? This is ridiculous, Cameron said, but he was already turning away. Jessica, let's go. But Jessica wasn't moving. She was staring at Sarah, taking in her simple dress, her lack of jewelry, her obvious contentment. You really don't care about the money? Jessica asked Sarah. Not even a little bit, Sarah replied. I care that David established a scholarship fund for future teachers with a significant portion of it. I care that he still shows up to work every day because he loves teaching. I care that he's kind and honest and doesn't measure his worth by his bank account. The money's just bonus. Jessica looked at me one last time, and I saw something break behind her eyes. 7 years of telling herself she'd made the right choice, that she'd won, that leaving me for Cameron was the smart play. And in one conversation, all of that crumbled. I hope you're happy, she said quietly, and for the first time, it didn't sound like an insult. It sounded like a plea. I am, I said honestly. I really am. Cameron grabbed Jessica's arm and practically dragged her toward the exit. As they left, I heard her say something to him, her voice sharp with accusation. He responded angrily, defensively. The perfect couple's facade was cracking, and I wasn't even sad to see it. My mother appeared at my side, having watched the entire exchange from across the room. That was intense, she said softly. That was 7 years coming, I replied. Your father would have been proud, Mom said. Not of Cameron, of you. He was wrong about you, David. I think he knew it at the end, but he was too stubborn to admit it. I looked around the church hall at people saying goodbye to my father, and realized I'd already said my goodbye years ago. When he chose Cameron's success over my dignity. When he made it clear that money mattered more than character. You ready to go home? Sarah asked. More than ready. As we walked to our car, I thought about everything that had happened. 7 years ago, losing Jessica had felt like the end of my world. Now I understood it had been the beginning of something better. Cameron had taken Jessica thinking he was winning some competition, but all he'd really done was save me from a marriage that would have slowly poisoned both of us. Jessica wanted someone who could buy her things. Cameron wanted a trophy to prove his superiority. They deserved each other. I'd found someone who saw me, really saw me, and loved what she saw. Someone who chose me when I was just a teacher and didn't change when she learned I was wealthy. Someone who valued the same things I did, who made me laugh, who made me want to be better. That's not winning or losing. That's just finding the right person finally. 6 months after the funeral, I got a call from my mother. David, I thought you should know. Cameron and Jessica are getting divorced. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and meant it. Not because I wanted them to be happy together, but because divorce is painful no matter who's going through it. Jessica left him, Mom continued. Apparently, she'd been having an affair with one of Cameron's business partners, someone wealthier. Cameron's devastated. I thought about that for a moment. Jessica doing to Cameron exactly what she'd done to me. The symmetry was almost poetic. How's Cameron taking it? I asked. Not well. He called me last night, crying. Said he didn't understand how Jessica could do this to him, after everything he'd given her. I laughed. Couldn't help it. He's serious? Completely. I tried to point out the irony, but he didn't want to hear it. He's asking if you'd be willing to talk to him, brother to brother. Tell him I hope he finds someone who loves him for who he is, not what he can provide, and tell him that's the only advice I'm willing to give him. Mom was quiet for a moment. You've really moved on, haven't you? I have, I said, looking across the room where Sarah was grading papers at our kitchen table, completely absorbed in her work. Turns out the best revenge is just living well. That was 2 years ago. Sarah and I now have a daughter, Emma, who's 14 months old and has her mother's determination and, apparently, my stubbornness. We're still teaching, still living in our modest house, still driving reliable cars. I see my mother regularly. She's part of Emma's life, a doting grandmother who finally understands that success isn't measured in dollars. I haven't spoken to Cameron since the funeral. Last I heard, he's working as a consultant for someone else's firm, trying to rebuild his reputation. Jessica's on her third marriage, still chasing wealth, still convinced that the next rich man will finally make her happy. The scholarship fund I established has sent 12 students to college to become teachers. 3 of them have already graduated and are teaching in underserved communities. That matters more to me than any amount of money in my bank account. People ask me sometimes if I ever think about what my life would have been like if Jessica hadn't left me for Cameron. And the truth is, I do think about it. I think about how I'd be married to someone who saw me as a means to an end rather than a partner. I think about how I'd have missed meeting Sarah, missed having Emma, missed building something that actually matters. What Cameron and Jessica did to me was one of the cruelest things you can do to another person. They betrayed my trust, destroyed my family, and nearly broke me completely. But they also freed me to become who I was meant to be. That day at the funeral, when Jessica asked if she'd won, she was asking the wrong question. This was never a competition. It was 2 people making choices about what kind of life they wanted to live and what kind of person they wanted to be. I chose integrity over appearance, purpose over profit, and real love over convenient status. And 7 years later, standing in that church hall with Sarah by my side, I got to see Jessica realize she'd chosen wrong. That's not revenge. That's just karma finally showing up to collect what it's owed. The best part? I didn't have to do anything except live my life, be honest, work hard, and love the people who deserved my love. Everything else took care of itself. So yeah, Jessica, I guess you could say you won. You got Cameron, got his money, got the lifestyle you wanted. For a while. But I got Sarah. I got Emma. I got peace. I got to build something meaningful. And I got to sleep at night knowing that every single thing in my life was earned honestly, chosen deliberately, and built on a foundation that won't crumble the moment someone wealthier comes along. You tell me who won. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been betrayed and wondered if you'd ever find happiness again, drop a comment below. Share your story. You're not alone. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about how life has a way of working things out, even when it feels like everything's falling apart. Hit that like button, and I'll see you in the next one.